November 3, 2012 marked the James Hardy Patterson Foundation's first annual inaugural event. Attendees from various walks of life gathered in the Atlanta University Center's Robert W. Woodruff Library to partake in this wonderful celebration, opening up their wallets and pocketbooks in support of the preservation of the African American classical music called jazz. Masters of Ceremony Brenda and Melvin Webb hosted the event, leading guests into a delightful afternoon filled with performances from the legendary flutist Hubert Laws, eloquent words from keynote speaker Javon Gayton, a silent auction, and a luncheon served with afternoon tea. The event kick-started with a ceremonial procession from the Stevenson High School's Color Guard.
At this time, we are going to get the program started, and we're going to stick to the program as it is printed. First order of business is to have the presentation of the colors by the ROTC group from Stevenson High School in Stone Mountain, Georgia. Gentlemen, take it away.
Hold. 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 Coach. Coach, can we get everyone to stand, please? Coach.
The Color Guards then led the audience into the Pledge of Allegiance, which was succeeded by an invocation by Reverend Dr. Dwight Andrews.
It's an honor to be a part of this event. I'm a big admirer and fan of Brother Patterson, great musician, great mentor, great teacher, and great citizen. And so both as a musician and as a clergy person, it's great for me to be a part of this wonderful event. Let's now ask for God's presence. Let us pray.
Followed by Melvin Webb's introduction to the Honorary Herbert Laws and Dr. James Hardy Patterson.
I'm just going to present to you at this time Mr. Patterson, director of the Clark Atlanta University Jazz Orchestra, who will bring Mr. Laws to us. Brother Patterson, please.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Just a few words here. Just want to welcome all of you this afternoon, and we wanted to say thank you for coming out and celebrating our first year anniversary and our inaugural event for the James Hardy Patterson Foundation, a foundation that was thought of and put together to preserve this music, African American classical music we call jazz. At this time, I would like to bring to the podium here, to the front here to perform for you, the fabulous friend of mine that I've known for probably 30, 35 years, and I reflect many years ago that we met here in Atlanta, I think it was. He was performing here with the CTI Jazz Festival, and I had a chance to hang out with him, and he's been here several times, and also that he performed with the Clark Atlanta University Jazz Orchestra as a soloist at Beat My Part. So we have quite a history of knowing each other. With all that being said, I'm going to bring to the front here Mr. Hubert Laws. Thank you. Let's give him a great round of applause.
Flutist Hubert Laws graced the stage and serenaded guests with a beautiful solo rendition of Amazing Grace. Kevin Waddy, president of the James Hardy Patterson Foundation, expressed his gratitude for all in attendance and the support of the foundation's first annual inaugural event.
This inaugural event is one that is very special for the Patterson Foundation, in that it started out in its infancy just about a year or so ago, where it was just a concept, a thought of being able to continue to preserve the wonderful music and the culture associated with African American classical music we know as jazz.
Waddy further explains the distractions that both generations, younger and older, face, emphasizing the importance of the preservation of this African American historical music form.
The words of Professor Patterson it's weapons of mass distraction, okay? And that there's so much that we're being bombarded with in terms of music, in terms of just the influence of the media that takes away from the actual roots of the music. And so our commitment is to continue that, to continue the awareness.
Prior to the event's commencement, we sat down with each honoree to hear their take on the importance of the preservation of jazz.
First of all, I'd like to say that I support the Congressman John Conya's bill, which is in progress right now, H.R. 2823. Of course, he passed the bill, H.R. 57 in 1987, making jazz a national treasure. But H.R. 28 and 23 is on the table for, it hasn't been passed yet. But anyway, that's preservation promotion of African American classical music. I think the issue here with preserving music is you must tell the truth about the music. You must tell that the music has roots in Africa. It's African American classical music, and the roots are in Africa. And you must say, well, all of this stuff that we speak about in terms of categorizing this music, swing, bebop, and all of that, but it's rooted in Africa.
My impression of the preservation of jazz, I will go back even further than Mr. Patterson mentioned. My study reveals that music is a gift from our Creator, and it's going to be preserved regardless of what human beings do, because it's a gift that is prevalent in the holy writings that tells us about music.
Well, architects, they have a social implication to consider when designing, and that means they have to know about other art forms. They have to know about how they can assist other art forms. And in my take about jazz, it's a neglected art form, such as many others that are identified with other cultures. And so, as an architect, a designer, you have to identify what a neglected art form needs. And most of the time, people need to know about it and be educated about it.
I am able to maintain the involvement of Ms. Patricia Waddy-Gayton as my Vice President for Development.
Upon recognizing members of his board, James Hardy Patterson goes on to explain the success of his foundation in its first year of being established.
Myself as founder and CEO and my entire board within 1 year brings us to the celebration of this celebration, which has successfully in 1 year created and implemented pathways that focused on the importance of preservation of African American classical music we call jazz. Within educational and musical programming, high schools, keynote speaking with JROTC at Stevenson High school students within the visual and performing arts, meetings with high school faculties and administrators.
All while acknowledging the presence of Mrs. Avis Carver Turner, the daughter of the late Wayman A. Carver, who was a professor and mentor to Dr. Patterson. Wayman's legacy was one that was untouched by many of today's jazz musicians. His daughter, Mrs. Carver Turner, explains and sheds light on the preservation of jazz music.
Well, in the preservation of jazz music, I think my most important contribution would have been the donation of my father's memorabilia to the Woodruff Library in the year 2002. I'd like to say that my father was well known prior to that time as a jazz musician. He had been written up in International Musician Magazine. Time Magazine also featured him in an article or mentioned him in an article. So he was actually well known in the jazz world at that time. However, our family was in possession of memorabilia which could shed light on not only those years, those early years, but the years after the big band era. So as we discussed it among the family, we thought it would be noteworthy to make a donation of my father's memorabilia to an institution which at the time could disseminate the information. So primarily that was the beginning of my interest in jazz preservation.
Dr. Patterson concludes his speech with a powerful message.
I would like to end by saying we are in a cultural war of survival. And from me to you and from our foundation, I love you madly. I'll leave you with this thought. The culture is a horrible possession to lose. Thank you.
Laws lightens up the crowd when he clarifies the uncertainty surrounding his eccentric choice of eyewear.
Actually, reading glasses, and I've got Ray here on bass. He says he's going to go Google it and find him a pair, because what they do is clarify things for you. It's almost like a revolution in eyesight, because, you know, the prescribed glasses weaken your eyes as you go along, but these actually strengthen your muscles. This is not a class in ophthalmology, but it's just an explanation of why I've got these funny-looking glasses while I play, okay?
Dr. Patterson and Mr. Laws, accompanied by acoustic bass player Ray McMurtry and guitarist Tavius Elder, put on a truly astounding set for the guest. Shortly after, guests were served lunch by the young honorable cadets of Stevenson High School's JROTC. The event wound down with a silent auction and enlightening words from keynote speaker Javon Gayton, who makes a seemingly unorthodox connection between architecture and jazz. Gayton uses the analogy of the nectar-eating bat in the fruit tree, breaking down the definition of cross-pollination and cross-process and comparing it to the relationship of architecture and jazz.
And you may think, what does architecture have to do with jazz? I know you've thought that before. Are you thinking that now? Well, what does a nectar-eating fruit bat and a fruit tree have to do with each other? Well, they are involved in what is called cross-pollination. What is that? I'm sure you learned that in school. Well, that is when the transfer of pollen from one plant or flower to the stigma of another. Well, just like fruit trees need bats, musicians need inspiration, neglected art needs architecture. Now, neglected art such as jazz, what does it need? It needs awareness. It needs promotion. It needs exposure. People need to be educated about this. Now, it's not only jazz, but a dance or anything that is starting, anything grassroots. The James Hardy Patterson Foundation recognizes this. The mission statement includes words such as preserve, educate, promote jazz. Congressman Conyers recognizes this in his bill. He has phrases such as to make certain jazz is preserved, understood, and promulgated. Well, architects can preserve, developers can promote, architects can educate the people to understand about jazz and any other neglected art form at that. How? By providing creative places for education.
The event ended with one last performance from the jazz ensemble, followed by door prizes.
thank you again very much for coming out and participating with us, and we look forward to seeing you at the next event.
As guests proceeded out, we caught up with a few who happily shared their thoughts of today's events.
We want our children to hear the music and see the dances and sing the songs of our ancestors. So this program was so wonderful. Very, very, very nice. Glad I was here to support the foundation, and I'll be at the future events. Thank you so much.
I thoroughly enjoyed this program. I was really didn't know what to expect once I got here, but when I did get here and actually saw everything going on, I gained a lot of knowledge and a lot of respect for the arts. One thing that I learned in particular was that it's called African American classical music, which is jazz, and I thought that was quite interesting. I enjoyed the heritage, learning about the heritage, and I feel like my cadets, I have about 14 cadets here, and I think my cadets gain a lot of knowledge and a lot of heritage from it too.
I too would like to add that I can see the foundation as being a very noteworthy project, and I look forward to its expansion, and the Carver Turner family has its complete and total support.
The James Hardy Patterson Foundation's first inaugural event was a huge success, reeling in a vast amount of supporters and raising awareness about the importance of the preservation of the African American classical music called jazz.